Greetings once more, occultists. This video contains stories which may be triggering or graphic due to the themes and nature of them. With that being said, make sure to like and subscribe for more content. Comment below and let's get 5 likes on this video. Are you ready? Let's begin. It's strange how ordinary places can transform into scenes of terror. My name is Emily, and what happened to me in the mundane aisles of a grocery store still haunts my dreams. This is my story, a chilling encounter that turned an everyday chore into a nightmare. It was a typical evening. I stopped at the local grocery store to pick up a few items for dinner. The store was familiar, a place I had visited countless times, its aisles a part of my routine. But that night, as I pushed my cart through the produce section, I felt an unsettling sensation, like ice boring into my back. Turning around, I caught a glimpse of a man. He was standing between the rows of fruits, his gaze fixed on me. I didn't recognize him, but I brushed off the feeling, assuming he was just another shopper. But as I moved through the store, from aisle to aisle, I noticed him again and again, always at a distance, watching me. His presence was unnerving, a shadow that followed me through the fluorescent-lit corridors of canned goods and cereal boxes. My heart started to race. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting, that it was a coincidence. But the fear gnawed at me, growing with every turn. In the dairy aisle, our eyes met. His were cold, emotionless, sending a chill down my spine. I quickened my pace, eager to leave. In the checkout line, I kept looking over my shoulder, but he was nowhere to be seen. A wave of relief washed over me as I walked out of the store, the cool night air a welcome escape. But the relief was short-lived. As I loaded my groceries into the car, I saw him again. He was standing under a street lamp in the parking lot, his gaze unyielding. Panic surged through me. I jumped into my car, locking the doors, my hands trembling as I started the engine. On the drive home, I kept checking my rearview mirror, expecting to see him following me. But the streets behind me were empty. By the time I reached home, I had convinced myself that it was all in my head, a product of stress and an overactive imagination. That night, I lay in bed, restless. The image of the man in the store plagued my thoughts, his emotionless stare imprinted in my mind. Sleep finally came, but it was fitful, filled with uneasy dreams. The next day, I tried to shake off the feeling, to return to normalcy. But as I walked to my car after work, I saw a note under the windshield wiper. It was from him, a message that read, "I enjoyed watching you last night. I'll see you soon." My blood ran cold. This was no coincidence, no overactive imagination. I was being stalked. I reported it to the police, showing them the note. They promised to look into it, but their words offered little comfort. I felt exposed, vulnerable, a target for a stranger's twisted obsession. The following days were a blur of paranoia. I varied my routine, avoided the grocery store, always looking over my shoulder. But I didn't see him again. A part of me hoped that it was over, that he had moved on. That hope was shattered one evening. I came home to find my front door ajar, the lock tampered with. Inside, my personal belongings were scattered, the sanctity of my home violated. In my bedroom, the intrusion was even more personal, my clothes strewn about, a photo of me taken from a drawer, placed prominently on the pillow. On the mirror, written in lipstick, were the words, "You can't escape me." I called the police, hysteria edging my voice. They arrived quickly, scouring my home for evidence, assuring me they would catch him. But the damage was done. My home, my refuge, was no longer safe. I stayed with a friend, too scared to return to my house. The police kept watch, but the stalker remained a shadow, elusive and terrifying. Then, one evening, as I was leaving work, I saw him. He was across the street, standing in the shadows, his eyes fixed on me. I froze, terror rooting me to the spot. But this time, I wasn't alone. My screams drew attention, and people rushed to my aid. The stalker fled, disappearing into the night. The police were called, and a manhunt ensued. Hours later, they found him, hiding in an alley, a collection of my photos and belongings in his possession. He was arrested, charged with stalking and breaking and entering. In his interrogation, he revealed his obsession, a fantasy world where I was the center. It was a chilling insight into the mind of a stalker, a person who had seen me as an object, not a human being. The trial was quick. He was found guilty, sentenced to prison, but the sense of safety I once felt was irrevocably shattered. I moved away, started a new life, but the fear followed me, a constant reminder of the horror I had endured. I'm cautious now, always aware of my surroundings. The experience has left deep scars, a distrust that lingers in every stranger's gaze. I've learned to be vigilant, to protect myself, but a part of me mourns the loss of innocence, the carefree days before I knew the true terror of being hunted. My story is a dark chapter, a time when an ordinary life was invaded by something sinister. But it's also a story of survival, of overcoming fear and reclaiming my life from the grip of a stalker's obsession. It's a reminder that sometimes, the monsters we fear are all too real, hiding in plain sight, waiting to turn our everyday world into a nightmare. My name is Liam, and the horrors I experienced in the basement still haunt my every waking moment and terrorize my dreams. It all started on a day that seemed like any other, but it led me down a path of darkness from which I barely escaped. I had always felt like someone was watching me, but I dismissed it as paranoia. Little did I know, my worst fears were about to become a reality. It was a normal evening. I was walking home from work when I felt a sharp pain in my head, and everything went black. When I regained consciousness, I was in a dimly lit, dingy basement, the stench of mold and decay filling the air. My head throbbed, my vision blurry. Panic set in as I tried to move, only to find myself bound to a chair. The basement was cold, the only light coming from a flickering bulb overhead. Across from me was another person, a young woman, bound and gagged. Her eyes were wide with terror, mirroring my own fear. Footsteps echoed down the stairs, and then he appeared, my stalker, a man whose face was etched into my nightmares. He was someone I had seen around my neighborhood, a shadow that had lingered in the background of my life. He smiled, a twisted grin that sent shivers down my spine. "You're finally awake," he said, his voice eerily calm. "I've been watching you for a long time, Liam. You're special to me." The realization that this man had been stalking me, observing my every move, was paralyzing. He approached me, his fingers tracing my face, his touch making my skin crawl. I learned that the woman was named Sarah. She had been there for days, enduring unspeakable horrors at the hands of our captor. Our eyes met, a silent understanding passing between us. We were in this nightmare together. The days blurred into a continuous cycle of fear and despair. Our captor would visit the basement, sometimes to taunt us, other times to inflict pain. He seemed to thrive on our suffering, a predator playing a sadistic game. We were given just enough food and water to keep us alive, our existence reduced to a fight for survival. The basement became our world, a prison from which there seemed to be no escape. In our moments alone, Sarah and I would talk in hushed whispers, sharing stories of our lives before the basement. She had been a student, her dreams shattered by the cruelty of our captor. In each other, we found a glimmer of hope, a reason to keep fighting. Our captor's visits grew more frequent, his actions more erratic. It was clear he was unraveling, consumed by his obsession. It was during one of these visits that our chance to escape came. He had left the basement door unlocked, a careless mistake that was our only hope. With every ounce of strength, we managed to free ourselves from our bonds. Creeping up the stairs, our hearts pounding, we knew this was our only chance. The house was silent, our captor nowhere in sight. We found a phone and dialed 911, our voices trembling as we relayed our location. The sound of sirens in the distance was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The police stormed the house, finding us in the basement, our relief turning into sobs as we realized our ordeal was finally over. Our captor was found hiding in the house, a coward confronted with his own end. He was arrested, the full extent of his madness coming to light. He had been watching me for months, his obsession driving him to kidnap me and Sarah. The aftermath was a whirlwind of police statements, medical examinations, and the struggle to reclaim our lives. The media dubbed him the Stalker of the field, a monster who had hidden in plain sight. For Sarah and me, the road to recovery was long and painful. We were survivors, but the scars of our experience ran deep. I struggled with nightmares, the feeling of being watched, a paranoia that lingered long after our captor was behind bars. Therapy helped, as did the support of my family and friends. But there are wounds that never fully heal, memories that lurk in the shadows of the mind. As I try to move forward, I'm reminded of the fragility of life, of the darkness that can hide within others. I've learned to cherish each day, to find strength in the face of fear. My story is a testament to survival, to the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable horror. But it's also a warning, a reminder to be vigilant, to be aware of the shadows that might lurk around us. Now, when I look at a field or a basement, I don't just see a place. I see a memory, a chapter of my life that tested the very limits of my strength and will. It's a chapter I've closed, but one that will forever be a part of who I am. My name is Mark, and my life has been a relentless nightmare ever since I made the fateful decision to pick up a hitchhiker. I've always considered myself a good Samaritan, but that day, at a desolate gas station, my kindness led me down a path of paranoia and fear. It was a dreary autumn evening when I saw him, a solitary figure standing in the rain, thumb outstretched. He was drenched, his clothes clinging to his skinny frame. Something about his forlorn state struck a chord in me, and against my better judgment, I pulled over. He climbed into the passenger seat, mumbling his thanks. He introduced himself as Tom. His voice was quiet, almost shy, but as we drove, he became more talkative, sharing stories of his travels. There was an intensity to him that made me slightly uneasy, but I brushed it off. I dropped him off at a crossroad, wishing him luck. He thanked me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and that was that. Or so I thought. Weeks passed, and the encounter faded from my mind. But then, things started happening, strange occurrences that I couldn't explain. I'd find objects in my house moved, or misplaced. I told myself I was just forgetful, but the nagging feeling of unease grew. One night, I came home to find a photo of me, taken from a distance, pinned to my front door. There was no note, no explanation. That's when I knew Tom was stalking me. The police couldn't help without more evidence, so I was left to deal with the growing terror on my own. I became paranoid, always looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. My home no longer felt safe. Months went by in a haze of anxiety. I installed security cameras, changed my routines, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Then, one evening, as I returned from work, I found Tom sitting on my porch. He looked different, haggard, his eyes sunken yet burning with an unsettling fervor. "I just wanted to see you again," he said, his voice eerily calm. I told him to leave, my voice trembling with fear, but he just smiled, that same unnerving smile. I locked myself in and called the police. By the time they arrived, Tom was gone. They searched the area but found no sign of him. I was advised to stay with friends or family, but I refused. This was my home, and I wouldn't be driven away. That night, I lay in bed, every creak and groan of the house setting my heart racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was close, watching, waiting. Sleep was impossible. Hours ticked by, the house enveloped in silence. Then, just as dawn was breaking, I heard it, the sound of someone trying to open the back door. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by my bed and crept down the stairs. The back door was ajar, a sliver of early morning light cutting through the darkness. I stepped into the kitchen, my grip tightening on the bat. That's when I felt it, a presence behind me. I spun around, and there he was, Tom, standing in the shadows of my living room. His face was twisted into a grotesque parody of a smile, his eyes gleaming with madness. We stood there, frozen, a standoff between predator and prey. Then, with a scream of rage, I lunged at him, swinging the bat with all my might. But he was quick, ducking out of the way, his laughter echoing through the house. I chased him, blind with fear and anger. We crashed through the living room, knocking over furniture, shattering the early morning stillness. Then, in a moment of clarity amidst the chaos, I realized the front door was open. This was my chance. I bolted, not looking back, running into the street, screaming for help. Neighbors emerged, lights flicking on, the sound of sirens in the distance. But as I turned back to look at my house, there was no sign of Tom. He had vanished, swallowed up by the dawn's light. The police arrived, but it was the same story, no evidence, no sign of Tom. They promised to keep an eye on my house, but I knew it wasn't over. Tom was out there, somewhere, a specter lurking in the periphery of my life. Now, I live in a state of constant vigilance, a prisoner of my own fear. I don't know when Tom will reappear or what he wants from me. My life has been reduced to a waiting game, a tense anticipation of his next move. As I sit here, writing this, I can't help but glance at the window, half expecting to see his face peering in. The thought sends a shiver down my spine, a reminder of the nightmare that my life has become. The story isn't over yet. It's a dark tale, still being written, each day a new page of uncertainty and dread. And as I brace myself for what comes next, I'm left wondering, will I ever be free of the hitchhiker's shadow? From the moment I first noticed him, standing outside my workplace, I knew something was wrong. My name is Eliza, and my life was turned into a living nightmare by an obsession I never wanted, never encouraged. It was a terror that escalated beyond my wildest fears. His name was Henry. He started as a customer at the coffee shop where I worked, a regular who would come in every morning for his usual order. Polite smiles and casual greetings were all we ever exchanged. But soon, I noticed him lingering, his glances turning into stares. It began with him appearing at places I frequented, the grocery store, the park where I jogged, even outside my apartment building. What a coincidence, he would say with a smile that never reached his eyes. I tried to be polite, dismissing him as just a harmless admirer. But then, the notes started. They would be left on my car, slipped under my apartment door. Notes that spoke of love, of destiny, of us being meant for each other. I confronted him, told him clearly that I wasn't interested, but he just nodded, that same eerie smile on his face. One evening, as I was closing up the shop, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned to find Henry, his expression no longer masked by a smile but twisted into something dark and possessive. "You can't ignore me, Eliza," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We're meant to be together. I won't let you deny it." I felt a surge of fear. "Stay away from me, Henry," I warned, my voice trembling. "I'm not interested in you. I'll call the police." He laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You can't get rid of me that easily," he said, stepping closer. "I love you, Eliza. You'll see we're perfect for each other." I ran, locking myself inside the shop, and called the police. They came, took my statement, and warned Henry to stay away. But I knew it wasn't over. I could feel his eyes on me, always watching, always waiting. The next few weeks were a blur of paranoia and fear. I changed my routines, got friends to accompany me, but the sense of being followed never left. I saw him everywhere, lurking in shadows, watching from a distance. Then came the night that everything escalated. I was walking home from a friend's house when I felt the unmistakable sensation of someone behind me. I turned and saw him, Henry, his face a mask of rage and obsession. "You think you can escape me?" he snarled, grabbing my arm. His grip was like iron, his eyes burning with madness. I struggled, trying to break free, but he was too strong. "Please, Henry, stop." I cried out, fear choking my voice. "You're hurting me." But he didn't listen. He dragged me into an alley, his hands moving to my throat. I fought with all my might, adrenaline and terror lending me strength. In the struggle, I managed to break free and run, my lungs burning, my heart pounding. I didn't stop running until I reached a crowded street, collapsing in front of a group of people. They called the police, their voices a distant echo as I succumbed to darkness. I woke up in the hospital, bruises on my neck, my arms sprained from the struggle. The police were there, their faces grim. They had caught Henry, but the damage he had done was irrevocable. The trial was a blur. Henry was convicted, sentenced to prison for assault and stalking. But even with him behind bars, the fear never left me. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every sound. I moved to a new city, started a new job, but the shadows of that night followed me. I couldn't form relationships, couldn't trust anyone. Henry had stolen more than my sense of safety, he had stolen my ability to live without fear. Now, I live my life looking for a peace that seems just out of reach, a tranquility shattered by the obsession of a man I barely knew. The scars, both physical and emotional, are a constant reminder of the horror I endured. As I try to rebuild my life, I'm left wondering why he chose me, what I did to deserve such terror. But some questions have no answers, some horrors no reason. And as I lie in bed at night, the darkness around me, I can't shake the feeling that it's not over, that the end of Henry's trial wasn't the end of my nightmare. It's a fear that lingers, a dark cloud hanging over my every moment, a shadow from which I can never truly escape.